The making of Cleveland's black suburb in the city, Lee-Seville and Lee-Harvard. Black builder entrepreneurs fulfill the dream of South Miles. Chapter 2. In an even less well-known story, a number of Cleveland's African-American building tradesmen made the jump to become general contractors or even founded construction companies. During the 1950s and 60s, they would construct hundreds of houses on vacant land, mainly south of Miles Avenue off Lee Road, thereby serving both and keeping money circulating within the black community. This accomplishment was no easy feat. This chapter focuses on the area of South Miles known as Lee-Seville. It is here at the outskirts of the city that black builders and contractors were able to achieve notable success constructing mid-century homes for a black middle class. Albert Taborn was a formidable presence in real estate and construction in Cleveland from 1946 into the early 1960s. Significantly, he devised and developed an alternative means of building construction that used interlocking hollowed bricks to allow for easy installation of wiring and plumbing. Taborn was also politically active, perhaps more so than the average real estate broker or builder, especially concerning himself with planning and policy decisions that directly affected Cleveland's majority black or racially integrating neighborhoods. Taborn was additionally a frequent author of articles in the Call and Post as they related to real estate or building concerns. Albert Lorenzo Taborn was born on June 10, 1920, to Vera Mae White and Raymond Dow Taborn. They lived in Michigan. Albert worked as a janitor while enrolled in his first year at Western Michigan College, where he majored in business administration. He later attended Wilberforce College, a historically black institution founded before the Civil War in southern Ohio and before moving to Cleveland in 1946. Taborn first worked for the city's leading black real estate salesman, John W. Carmack, and around the same time married Jeanette Tyler, who was highly active in African American women's social groups. By 1947, Al established the Taborn Realty Company, first headquartered at 7807 Cedar Avenue. Taborn was a charter member of the Cleveland Association of Real Estate Brokers and in 1949 served as its president. That same year, Taborn began to experiment with building houses, releasing an advertisement in the Call and Post for a 1.5-story colonial revival house to be constructed on the buyer's property with a $500 down payment. Taborn Realty also offered financing, with the only qualification being that the household must earn $250 or more per month. In 1954, the Cleveland Home Builders Association accepted Taborn's application, thus making him the first black member of that organization. He attended the National Association of Home Builders Convention in Chicago, a gathering of over 2,000 delegates, of which he was apparently the only African American member present. Earlier that year, Taborn announced that his main concern would be developing new sources of housing for Negroes in Cleveland, and that he already had plans and ideas for how to make that happen. Taborn released a statement that he was quitting real estate to exclusively focus on home building. Taborn dubbed his new home design the Lorenzo, using his own middle name. The first Lorenzo built was at 16606 Langley Avenue, south of Miles Avenue, and just east of Lee Road, in the vicinity of the then still standing Seville homes. Lorenzos were constructed of SCR brick, a new masonry product that was larger and wider than standard brick, at the same time being hollow, so that pipes and wiring can be run through it, making tremendous savings in the costs of electrical and plumbing work. The open house for this model home was on July 4th, 1954, and received extensive publicity in the Call and Post. True to Taborn's words, Lorenzo's offered a 3-bedroom brick house for $11,900, about $111,500 in 2018 dollars. Taborn Home Builders partnered with 12 other Black-owned organizations to construct and finance Lorenzos. Architects and engineers for the Lorenzo homes were from Dubin Housing Corporation, a white-owned company that would later go on to build nearly 600 homes for African American families further to the south off Lee Road and Tarkington Avenue. Al Taborn constructed 25 homes in Cleveland. 3 of the homes Taborn constructed are located on Cleveland's west side. The green pins on this map show the other 22 parcels, all located in Lee-Seville. Al Taborn took on new roles and gained further recognition into the later years of the decade. He was a project manager for the first urban redevelopment and renewal plan to be completed in Cleveland. In 1959, Taborn received national recognition as one of 54 recipients of the Blue Ribbon Award for Home Building Excellence from the Saturday Evening Post. In 1961, Al was once again elected president of Carib, which during his term would later go on to open a school of real estate. Albert and Jeanette Taborn subsequently left Cleveland for Los Angeles in an attempt to duplicate his success at building houses for Black families there, but unfortunately did not succeed. By 1971, Al and Jeanette had relocated to Paw Paw, Michigan. For the remainder of his life, Al bought, sold, and rented properties in Kalamazoo, Michigan. He retained ownership of Taborn Realty, always working for himself until his death on February 5, 1994. In Cleveland and Kalamazoo, Albert Taborn left a legacy of providing quality new homes for Black homeowners that warrants recognition in America both today and into the future. Arthur Bussey was a formally trained bricklayer and building contractor who ultimately built nearly 24 homes for Black middle-class families in Cleveland on 2 streets in the southeastern corner of the city, Myrtle Avenue and Highview Drive. Bussey was born in Augusta, Georgia around February 1894 to Jasper and Anna Bussey, the fifth of their 9 children. As of 1910, Bussey did not yet have a job and was likely still pursuing his education. Augusta was home to the privately run Haynes Normal and Industrial Institute, established by Lucy Craft Laney in 1883. Laney's school became the first in Augusta to offer kindergarten classes, and it enrolled approximately 900 African American students by 1912. It is very likely Arthur attended school here before pursuing a degree in Georgia State Industrial College in Savannah, where he enrolled in a building trades program to learn bricklaying and plastering. Bussey arrived in Cleveland sometime between 1917 and 1919 and appears in the 1920 census as a bricklayer. In January 1923, he married Emma Jackson, a fellow migrant from Greenville, South Carolina. From 1926 to 1928, the Busseys did not appear in the Cleveland City Directory, and it was probably during this time that Arthur earned a certificate in architectural drafting from Chicago Technical College, almost surely at night school. When the Busseys appeared in Cleveland in 1929, they likely had ambitious dreams. That year, they purchased a home at 2364 East 88th Street, and the next year's census listed Arthur's profession as architect. The Great Depression devastated Cleveland's economy, hitting African Americans particularly hard. As the housing market collapsed, African American building tradesmen were passed over in favor of white workers for what little work was available. Tellingly, Bussey listed his occupation as laborer in the 1931 City Directory. Starting in 1932, however, Bussey resumed describing his work alternatively as architect and mason contractor. Some of the scarce available construction work would have been on black institutions like churches, and in 1940, Bussey served as general contractor for the rebuilding of the church to which he and Emma belonged, Emmanuel Baptist, which had been destroyed in a 1939 fire. In 1947, Bussey purchased a substantial parcel of land near the city's southern border at Lee and McCracken Roads, the first of 47 more transactions he would make over the next 20 years. In 1948, Bussey personally financed the construction of sewers for Myrtle Avenue and Highview Drive, on which he went on to build several dozen houses, including a new one for Emma and himself. Bussey went on to become one of a handful of African American developers in Cleveland, and by 1959 had built approximately 40 new houses for interested clients, mostly upwardly mobile middle-class blacks, but of whom approximately 1/5 were white. Mr. and Mrs. Willie Jones were living in an apartment in the Mount Pleasant neighborhood when they saw an advertisement in the Call and Post for Arthur Bussey's development at Myrtle and Highview Drive. The year was 1959. Here, Mr. Jones recalls purchasing his home from Arthur Bussey.
We happened to run across an ad of an Afro-American builder, Arthur Bussey, who had a development on Highview and Myrtle, which we went to his house to let him know we were interested in purchasing a home. And he was surprised that young people were thinking of buying a home in that area. So after negotiating with him that we were interested, we would buy, he said, okay, I'll try to get you guys get going. And we had saved up quite a bit of money for down payment, and it was a brick home, and this was about 1960. And it was hard to get financing at that time because my wife was childbearing age, so we couldn't get FHA loans. So we did, Arthur Bussey did have a mortgage company he dealt with, Security Federal Savings and Loan. And I called them to let them know I was interested in purchasing a home, told them my age, told them where I worked, how much money I made. And the lady was elated that at my age that we had this amount of money. She said, well, you don't need that. You only need 20% down. And your interest rate would be about 4.5%. And I was elated. I didn't get her name. I was so excited to get the lady's name. So we set up an appointment to go to Security Federal Savings and Loan to secure the loan. When I got there and told the lady I had an appointment at 11 o'clock, the lady looked at me strange, and I had my wife with me, and she said, are you sure? I said, yes. The one I talked to told me I only need 20% down and they finance 80%. She said, well, she went in the back to talk to someone, and she said, well, who did you talk to? Well, I didn't have the lady's name. She said, well, no, we don't finance 80% of the loan. You have to have more than that. I said, well, why did she tell me that? She said, I don't know, but we just don't do that. But the reason was, when I talked to her on the phone, she didn't know I was Afro-American. So when I got there and they saw I was, then she said, well, we can give you a loan, but you'd have to put down 25%, and your interest rate would be 6.5%, which we did take because I wanted the home. We went to Mr. Bussey, and he said, okay, we drew up all the papers, and proceeded to proceed with the loan, with the building of the home. And I only had one lot on the original deeds, but there was an empty lot next door that they could not, it wasn't big enough to build a home on, but it was big enough for me to acquire that I could add on to my home, which I did purchase from Bussey through a guy named Woodridge, who was also a builder. But to make a long story short, we couldn't go to the suburbs at that time, and this was an Afro-American builder who had homes in our area. I grew up in the area. I also went to the Cleveland Public Schools, John Adams High, which was, at the time we went there, was 95% Caucasian, 5% Afro-Americans. So we got a very good education. And maybe that's how I got my speech, I guess. But at any rate, as we proceeded through the building of the home, and I think other person built about 23 homes. And we were like the last phase of that development because myself, I was the next to last. And the last was one of our neighbors, Rita Kennedy. Which she just sold our home because she had to go into senior living. But we are the original owners at 16308 Highview Drive. And we were pleased to move into the area because at that time it was about 90% home ownership for Afro-Americans at that time. And the school system was excellent.
Arthur Bussey died in February 1972 at the age of 78. He and Emma never had children, although one obituary described him as the uncle of many nieces and nephews. The Bricklayers and Masons Union Local Number 5, which Bussey joined as early as 1919, ran an obituary commemorating his membership. In 2018, the Myrtle-Highview Historic District became the first district developed and built by an African American to be designated as a local landmark. The district, comprised of all 32 Bussey homes plus 10 homes by other developers, was then designated by the National Park Service as a National Register Historic District in 2019. William E. Woodridge was active as a builder, contractor, and real estate agent in the Lee-Harvard area beginning in 1955. first with Taborn and Company Builders, and then with his own firm, Engineering Enterprises and Realty, from 1958 to 1963. Engineering Enterprises and Realty, EE&R, was Woodridge's first and only known home building company. A 1958 ad praised the skills of Woodridge's firm, stating it handled the entire cycle of home building to home ownership. Features in EE&R designed homes included built-in fireplaces, acoustical ceilings, exposed beams, full basements, multicolored walls, and kitchens with gas and electrical appliance hookups. When William E. Woodridge of Engineering Enterprises and Realty began to build in the Myrtle-Highview neighborhood, he unintentionally introduced design modification not in Arthur Bussey's original vision for the neighborhood that caused a controversy. That ultimately resulted in a school teacher and her sister backing out of their commitment to purchase neighboring homes. The following excerpt, Myrtle Avenue Group Protests Garage, is from the October 11, 1958 issue of the Call and Post.
Myrtle Avenue, located in the southeastern corner of the city of Cleveland and west of Lee Road, is a most unusual location. Residents boast that it is one of the few, if not the only street in the city, completely Negro-owned and Negro-built which conform to each other. Also, the homes are all brick, and when building is completed, there will be about 20 similar, well-manicured residences in the $32,000 and up price range. But all is not well on impressive Myrtle Avenue right now. Virtually the entire neighborhood is up in arms over a garage because it will be constructed on the left side of the house instead of on the right, in keeping with the rest of the homes. This means that two houses will have driveways adjacent to each other, which, residents claim, will break up the order thus far achieved in construction of earlier building on the street. Some of these persons met with Woodridge's backers Tuesday morning, but there was nothing the group could do for the protesters. Quiet, well-built Myrtle Avenue is an impressive street, but residents are afraid that the garage built out of place may well mean the end of their plans for a perfectly built community.
Well, it was two sisters had started building the houses, because Woodridge, he was the builder for 3 houses on the street. So they had problems. So I found out from a friend of mine that owned the 3rd house down the street that these 2 houses was going up for sale. So we contacted the builder, and he finished the house for myself and my friend next door.
And where did you live at the time?
I lived on Chateau, which is about three streets up.
Oh.
We built that house.
William Errol Woody Woodridge constructed 11 known properties in Cleveland, 2 on the west side, 1 at the border of Cleveland and Shaker Heights, and the remaining 8 shown on this map. 6 of Woodridge's properties are contributing structures in the Myrtle-Highview Historic District. In his later life, Woodridge took up additional pursuits. He found a new way to share his skills as a teacher in the Cleveland Public Schools as a faculty member responsible for teaching drafting at Max Hayes Vocational High School on the west side. Woodridge passed in Cleveland on November 3rd, 2007. Rufus Ranaldson is known locally for his construction of the Indland homes along Glen Park Road and Nolan Avenue in Cleveland's far southeastern corner. He was born into a large family on October 22, 1922 in Tunnel Spring, Alabama, and later moved to Pensacola, Florida. Ranaldson moved north like many other African Americans in the Great Migration. In 1950, he married Emma Jean Arnold in Cleveland, and their son was born later that year. During his initial years in town, Ranaldson worked for the U.S. Post Office and attended the Cleveland School of Meat Cutting, a skill that would serve him well when he opened a grocery store at 868 East 105th Street in early 1950. For a time, the young Ranaldson family lived in the Harvard apartments at 866 East 105th Street, right next door. The Cleveland Call-and-Post described Ranaldson's new venture as one of the best-known food shops in the Glenville section. He soon joined with 10 other black Cleveland grocers to form Atomic Foods, a chain of grocery stores conceived as the best means of pooling buying power and selling efficiency of the Negro food market. This method of pooling capital to buy bulk goods at wholesale prices would seem to have inspired the collaborative approach to home building that Ranaldson would later deploy when his career in real estate took off. And even while managing his grocery store, he was already thinking of his next career move. Ranaldson would soon go on to partner with James Smith in forming a real estate brokerage. In 1952, Ranaldson joined with 10 other African American investors to purchase the Quincy Savings and Loan Company. Located at 8309 Quincy Avenue, this thrift focused on making loans to prospective homeowners and represented a revival of the tradition of black-owned banks not seen since the collapse of Herbert Chauncey's Empire Savings and Loan during the 1930s Great Depression. Within 5 years, Quincy's assets exceeded $3 million as it focused on underwriting purchases that mainstream white-owned banks refused to consider. In early 1953, Ranaldson struck out on his own and founded Economy Home and Builders, later the Economy Realty Company. This venture proved quite successful as Ranaldson continued operating under this name into the 1970s. Part of the success of this venture can be attributed to a cooperative home building initiative that utilized an economics of scale strategy to bring down the cost of building materials. This strategy was used to construct the Cleveland Cooperative Model Homes, later called the Inland Homes. These homes were prefabricated and designed to be assembled quickly. Most had 3 bedrooms and cost between $13,500 and $15,000. Shown here is a map of the 20 homes constructed by Rufus Ranaldson on Nolan Avenue in Lee-Seville. By 1961, Ranaldson had moved his own family to 16801 Nolan Avenue. In 1965, Ranaldson signed up with Fair Housing Associates, a cooperative that enabled participating real estate brokers to share their listings, thereby reaching a wider pool of potential buyers. Economy Realty Company continued in business through the 1980s, although advertisements for their services in the Call and Post were discontinued after 1965. Whether Rufus Ranaldson continued operating Economy Realty himself or passed the company on to an associate or one of its 3 children is unknown. Rufus Ranaldson passed away on May 24, 2008. One of the most ambitious plans to provide housing for Cleveland's upwardly mobile African American families succeeded in erecting at least 80 homes during its brief existence, ultimately succumbing to the numerous setbacks facing black-owned construction companies at the time. The story of that firm, after several name changes, finished as Southeast Builders, was a heartfelt one that received considerable attention in the Call and Post in the early 1950s. In 1949, 3 men with no formal training in the buildings trade, all of them recent transplants from the South, made a pact to help build each other's houses in the Lee-Seville area on lots they owned just east of the Seville Homes housing project. These 3 men, John Thomas, Leslie Ephraim, and John Harmon, attracted the notice of 2 of their neighbors, Leroy Ballard and his younger brother, Bronson, who offered to help them complete the remaining houses. Also building houses for upwardly mobile black families in Lee-Seville were 2 professional bricklayers, Tillman Carr and James Dillard. On April 5, 1952, this group of builders, along with 2 others, incorporated the Carr and Dillard Construction Company. However, in 1954, the company agreed to reorganize as Southeast Builders, Inc., with 3 of the original 9 members leaving the group. At first, this financing arrangement seemed to be working nicely. That winter, the firm announced plans for Tarkington Heights, a project of 100 colonial and ranch-style homes in the $15,000 to $16,000 price range. Having built 80 homes to date, the firm was said by the Call and Post to be making a new departure in developing this entire neighborhood of new housing on vacant land adjacent to Carouche Park. But danger signals were already apparent as 8 Southeast customers with a combined total of nearly $5,000 in down payments, dissatisfied with lengthy building delays, lodged a complaint with Cleveland's Better Business Bureau. Unfortunately, Southeast Builders ceased all construction in May 1955, and by that fall was under investigation for a rash of new complaints. When it finally went under in March 1956, the firm owed some 96 customers a combined total of nearly $50,000, and to make matters worse, 5 home purchasers were facing foreclosure suits filed by subcontractors seeking to collect liens on the bankrupt company's unpaid debt. This map shows 25 out of the 26 homes known to be built by Southeast Builders, all concentrated in Lee-Seville. Not pictured is one home located just north in Lee-Harvard. Little else is known about the directions that the various partners took after their time during the firm's brief and complicated history. Tillman Carr continued to live in his house in the historic West Park Enclave on St. John Avenue. He died on January 15, 2000. James M. Dillard died young in February 1968, and at the time of his death was still living in a house on Alberta Avenue that he almost certainly built for himself. Leroy Ballard, who was also involved in the company before it became Southeast Builders, taught carpentry. His obituary states that he built 28 homes in the Lee-Seville area in total, including one for each of his 3 children. He died on April 22, 1994. This concludes Chapter 2, Black Builder Entrepreneurs Fulfill the Dream of South Miles.